Sergey Nechayev remains one of the most controversial and influential figures in the history of Russian revolutionary politics. Born on October 2nd, 1845, in the provincial town of Ivanov, Nechayev would grow to embody the most extreme tendencies of 19th-century radical thought, leaving behind a legacy that would both inspire and horrify subsequent generations of revolutionaries. His brief but intense career as a revolutionary theorist and organizer fundamentally shaped the landscape of Russian radical politics and provided a template for extremist movements that would echo through the 20th century and beyond. The social and political context of Nechayev's emergence cannot be understood without examining the broader currents of Russian society in the mid-19th century. The reign of Tsar Alexander II had brought significant reforms, including the emancipation of the serfs in 1861, but these changes had also created new tensions and expectations that the autocratic system struggled to accommodate. The growing educated class, particularly university students, found themselves caught between the promise of modernization and the reality of continued political oppression. It was within this volatile atmosphere that young radicals like Nechayev began to question not merely the pace of reform, but the entire foundation of Russian society. Nechayev's early life provided little indication of the revolutionary fervor that would later consume him. Born into a family of modest means, he initially pursued a conventional path as a teacher, working in various educational institutions around Moscow and St. Petersburg. However, his exposure to radical literature and his participation in student circles gradually drew him into the underground world of revolutionary politics. The influence of radical thinkers such as Nikolai Chernyshevsky and Dmitry Pisarev began to shape his worldview, while his natural charisma and organizational abilities marked him as a potential leader among his peers. The pivotal moment in Nechayev's transformation came during the student unrest of 1869, when he emerged as one of the more militant voices calling for direct action against the Tsarist regime. Unlike many of his contemporaries who favored gradual change or legal opposition, Nechayev advocated for immediate and violent revolution. His rhetoric was characterized by an apocalyptic vision of social transformation that would require the complete destruction of existing institutions and the elimination of all opposition to revolutionary goals. It was during this period that Nechayev began to develop his most infamous contribution to revolutionary theory, encapsulated in his work, the Revolutionary Catechism. This document, written in collaboration with the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin during Nechayev's exile in Switzerland, represented a radical departure from previous revolutionary thought in its systematic advocacy of deception, manipulation, and violence as legitimate tools of political change. The Catechism outlined a vision of the revolutionary as a completely dedicated individual who had severed all ties to conventional morality in society, existing solely to advance the cause of revolution through any means necessary. The Catechism's influence extended far beyond its immediate historical context, establishing principles that would be adopted by extremist movements across the political spectrum. Its emphasis on the ends justifying the means, the necessity of absolute dedication to the revolutionary cause, and the legitimacy of violence against both enemies and potential allies created a template for political extremism that would be repeatedly invoked throughout the 20th century. The document's clinical approach to violence and its systematic dehumanization of political opponents represented a significant escalation in revolutionary rhetoric, moving beyond calls for social change to advocacy for what amounted to political warfare. Nechayev's practical application of these theories proved to be both his moment of greatest notoriety and the beginning of his downfall. Upon his return to Russia in 1869, he established a secret revolutionary organization called the People's Retribution, which he claimed was part of a vast network of revolutionary cells preparing for an imminent uprising. In reality, the organization was largely a product of Nechayev's imagination, existing primarily to serve his personal ambitions and to provide a vehicle for implementing his radical theories. The group's activities culminated in the murder of Ivan Ivanov, a fellow revolutionary who had begun to question Nechayev's methods and authority. The killing, carried out on November 21st, 1869, was not the result of ideological differences or strategic necessities, but rather Nechayev's attempt to bind his followers to him through complicity in violence. The murder demonstrated the practical consequences of Nechayev's theoretical framework, showing how the systematic abandonment of moral constraints could lead to the victimization of the very people the revolution claimed to represent. The Ivanov murder sent shockwaves through Russian radical circles and provided the government with a powerful tool for discrediting the revolutionary movement as a whole. The subsequent investigation and trial revealed the extent of Nechayev's deceptions and manipulations, exposing him not as a dedicated revolutionary, but as a cynical opportunist who had exploited the genuine idealism of his followers for personal gain. The scandal effectively destroyed the credibility of his approach and led to a broader reassessment of revolutionary tactics among Russian radicals. Despite the immediate failure of his methods, Nechayev's influence on revolutionary thought proved to be remarkably durable. His emphasis on organization, discipline, and the systematic use of violence found echoes in later revolutionary movements, from the Bolsheviks to various terrorist organizations of the 20th century. Vladimir Lenin, while critical of Nechayev's specific methods, acknowledged the value of his organizational insights and incorporated many of his ideas about revolutionary dedication and party discipline into Bolshevik theory and practice. The psychological dimensions of Nechayev's approach to revolution reveal important insights into the nature of political extremism. His ability to attract followers despite his obvious character flaws suggests the powerful appeal of absolute certainty and total commitment in times of social upheaval. The Revolutionary Catechism's promise of complete liberation from conventional moral constraints offered a seductive alternative to the complexities and compromises of normal political life, appealing particularly to young people frustrated with the slow pace of social change. Nechayev's relationship with established revolutionary thinkers like Bakunin also illuminates the tensions within the broader radical movement of the 19th century. While Bakunin initially saw Nechayev as a valuable ally in promoting anarchist ideas, he eventually became disgusted with the younger man's methods and disavowed their collaboration. This split reflected deeper disagreements about the means and ends of revolutionary change, with more established radicals recognizing that Nechayev's approach threatened to discredit the entire movement. The literary impact of Nechayev's career cannot be overlooked, as his methods and personality provided inspiration for some of the most powerful works of Russian literature. Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel Demons, published in 1872, was directly inspired by the Ivanov murder and provided a devastating critique of revolutionary extremism. Through the character of Pyotr Verkhovensky, clearly based on Nechayev, Dostoevsky explored the psychological and moral corruption that could result from the abandonment of traditional ethical constraints in pursuit of political goals. The international dimensions of Nechayev's career also deserve attention, as his collaboration with European anarchists and his time in exile demonstrated the increasingly international character of revolutionary movements in the 19th century. His ability to move between different national contexts and to adapt his message to various audiences showed both his tactical sophistication and the universal appeal of his extremist message. This international dimension would become increasingly important in later revolutionary movements, as ideas and tactics developed in one context were rapidly transmitted to others. Following his arrest and extradition from Switzerland in 1872, Nechayev spent the remainder of his life in the Peter and Paul Fortress, where he died in 1885. Even in prison, he continued to attempt to organize revolutionary activities, demonstrating the persistence of his commitment to his cause despite its obvious failures. His prison writings revealed a somewhat more reflective approach to revolutionary theory, though he never fully repudiated his earlier methods or acknowledged the harm they had caused. The assessment of Nechayev's historical significance requires careful consideration of both his immediate impact and his longer-term influence. In the short term, his methods clearly damaged the Russian revolutionary movement and provided ammunition for government repression. His cynical manipulation of idealistic young people and his willingness to resort to violence against fellow revolutionaries demonstrated the potential for corruption inherent in extremist approaches to political change. However, the longer-term influence of his ideas proved to be more complex and troubling. The organizational methods outlined in the Revolutionary Catechism, stripped of their most obviously objectionable elements, provided a template for disciplined revolutionary organizations that would prove highly effective in later contexts. The emphasis on absolute dedication, systematic preparation, and the use of violence as a political tool became standard elements of 20th century revolutionary movements, from the Bolsheviks to various national liberation movements. The moral questions raised by Nechayev's career remain relevant to contemporary discussions of political violence and extremism. His systematic rejection of conventional ethical constraints in favor of revolutionary necessity established a precedent that would be repeatedly invoked by later movements seeking to justify violence against civilians and political opponents. The argument that exceptional circumstances require exceptional methods continues to resonate in various forms of contemporary political discourse, making an understanding of Nechayev's legacy essential for anyone seeking to comprehend the dynamics of political extremism. The educational value of studying Nechayev lies not in any admiration for his methods or goals, but in the insights his career provides into the psychology and sociology of political extremism. His ability to attract followers, his systematic approach to organization and propaganda, and his ultimate failure provide valuable lessons about both the appeal and the limitations of extremist approaches to social change. Understanding these dynamics is essential for anyone seeking to promote peaceful and democratic approaches to political reform. In conclusion, Sergey Nechayev represents a crucial figure in the development of modern political extremism, whose influence extended far beyond his brief career as an active revolutionary. His systematic articulation of extremist principles and his practical demonstration of their consequences provided both a cautionary tale about the dangers of revolutionary excess and a template that would be repeatedly invoked by later movements. While his immediate impact was largely destructive, the broader questions raised by his career about the relationship between means and ends in political change remain as relevant today as they were in 19th century Russia. His legacy serves as a reminder that the pursuit of even the most idealistic goals can be corrupted by the adoption of extreme methods, and that the price of such corruption is paid not only by the extremists themselves, but by the broader society they claim to represent.